Yeah, yeah, basically about that. Yeah, the recording. You said somehow because what Infinity supposedly agreed to when Archie put in the question about concepts and their idealism, physical based upon human distinction from the mind. You basically said that this would prove Archie's position, right? That was your general argument.
No, 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 no. I mean, like, didn't it's actually trying to say is it agree to that the fact that conceptualization came from the mind of a human, right? Where humans formalize things and they make a concept, but right. And then Archie just puts that in question. If conceptualization came from the mind of a human, then there must be something that they they got that from, right? I mean, like before they conceptualize it, they learn it from the object itself before they conceptualize it. So there be that there must be something that they saw before they conceptualize it, which is
That's the thing.
actually
Go ahead.
which is actually actually consistent to the position of what's trying to
Archie.
arguing, which is realism. Yeah,
It's a thing. That's not even realism. That's called naturalism when you're basically saying humans need to identify stuff through vision. Basically, what I'm going to say is that there's a thing inside ontology, four branches of ontology. It's called empiricism, positivism, rationalism, and realism. Realism is basically something that posits a philosophical stance of abstractions existing objectively through reality. So, for an analogy, I will be using basically a tree, right? Just because someone
yeah,
ain't around to observe it, it means the concept could still exist because the nature of said thing still exists. The earth basically gives life to things, so we can basically say that a tree would fundamentally exist through the nature of the earth's growing life. Doesn't necessarily have to mean that we would need to conceptualize something. Say, for instance, like wheels. Transportation
yeah,
existed in a form of walking. That's a form of basically travel, like wheels is. Just because we don't normally, we have to like conceptualize things to set our mind. We don't necessarily have to like, you know, conceptualize to make something exist. Something can exist without our view, which is basically the argumentation for realism. Archie put in a question about his the concepts, which basically he was trying to argue that humans would need to identify something for that, which isn't the case because concepts existing like say abstractions are fundamentally independent from the mind. Say for existence, when we argue ideological existences like physical things, it doesn't really need to matter based upon the human principle because it could still exist. For take like for an example, a chair, it could still exist within that regard. So him putting in that question doesn't necessarily prove his position. He'd just be putting in the question about Infinity's wording. Infinity's argument would be that it could still exist based on the ontology branch of realism, along with rationalism, because we would have to give rational observation and empirical observation to the claim of concepts. Basically, it would be a metaphysical concept, basically meaning that the proposition can still exist through via that nature and basically be true through a state of affairs via that necessity. It exists within nature is going to be that necessity which proves why it would be a possibility on metaphysical levels. And this also gives absolutes because it's unconditional. Metaphysical possibilities are unconditional and perfect. So it's going to be absolute ontology, which proves the nature of a concept existing within that set form of existence. So let's take to example for a proposition, right? Exons. Exons are basically fundamental absolute truths of the universe that can't be questioned. So these concepts being independent from the human mind would be absolute. It doesn't necessarily have to mean or depend on humans formalizing an identification.
yeah. Yeah. So that is like how that is actually like realism is, right? I mean, like exist independently without humans actually needing to conceptualize it.
That's what Infinity was trying to argue. What I'm basically saying is basically Archie was taking a naturalism stance. Basically
No,
trying to get some. Yes, he was. He was trying to argue naturalism. Infinity was arguing based upon realism, saying that concepts can exist, while you stated within your text that Archie was stating that there would need to be human identification for that. That would be a naturalism stance, which is the negation to a
no, no, no,
realism
no.
stance.
Archie actually trying to ask Infinity that humans cannot conceptualize things before they actually identify it. It also means that Archie was actually trying to say is that indirectly trying to say that things actually exist before humans conceptualize it. It's just that humans conceptualize it after they discover it, you know?
That's not necessarily like truth or anything, because we could say through empirical observation that it can be conducted into a positive like stance. Positivism, we can also say it'd be a negative factor of that. So he could still be considered to be arguing a naturalism stance based upon that. Even if we can't identify something like and we discover it like after it's already existing, it would be the nature and will of something through that rationalistic belief. So it basically still exists, but at the same time he's trying to argue that humans would still identify it, even though it still exists without human identification. So he's still trying to
Yeah,
argue that proposal.
yeah. I mean, so the thing actually exists before humans conceptualization, right? That's what you're trying to imply here.
Yep, that's what I'm trying to imply, but I'm also trying to imply Infinity was trying to imply that through empirical observation and humans could identify this set concept. He wasn't necessarily going negation against Archie, what Archie was trying to do. He's basically putting the question about these concepts. There would need to be a form of substance. That substance is
Yeah,
going to be evidency of the eyes of humans. But he's also trying to like exert that it would like exist without it. But going based off substance, it would have to exist, right?
yeah. It would have to exist.
Yeah, but that creates conflicting conditions. If humans
Yeah,
can't conceptualize things, then we can also say that then that wouldn't really like exist because concepts can be considered ideas, and if we dub some a concept, it can be conceptualized and it's already there through nature, but an idea separates that from nature or something. But
if human
that also creates another dialetheism type thing where it becomes a true contradiction where it says it can exist but can't. That's going to be a true
yeah,
contradiction which makes Archie's stance like illogical.
right. Actually, in the recording, Archie stands is that Archie is trying to argue for realism.
That's the thing. I already debunked that. You're just repeating yourself going circular. I already went
Oh
against that
well.
and proved how just arguing both at the same time. That's going to create like a true contradiction, which makes it in classical logic like a true contradiction, which means it's going to be like in a like conflicting conditions which just cancels out both. So he wouldn't really be arguing any stance. He's just putting into question about something stupid, which Infinity already is arguing a naturalist state. But he's also arguing like realism, because we still identify things and we have to conceptualize it, but we also have to go through realism. So basically, Infinity isn't really wrong. He's just presupposing something, but still justifies it with that set of logic. But which basically doesn't create any conflicted conditions because he'd like still have to justify it. But Archie was just going on something else. I don't know.
Oh,
So you concede?
I mean, I agree with that. With
Oh,
your argument about the atheism. Yeah, I mean, like, something. If you want something to exist, I mean, like, we have to actually conceptualize it as well that it exists, right? I mean, like something that is objectively exists. We gotta have to like conceptualize it as well, so that we can tell that it exists. For example, like a tree. So if there is a tree, we conceptualize it as a tree, and then there you go. That tree exists because that is But if we cannot actually conceptualize it, then it can also means that the tree exists, but the tree cannot exist at the same time because we cannot actually conceptualize the tree, but the tree itself objectively exists. Yeah, I agree with that, with the
Yeah, so like,
dialectism stuff.
yeah, so that's why I'm saying like Archie wasn't really questioning anything about that point. So yeah,
Okay.
all right, I'll just say the recording now.
Wait, hey, y'all debating?